It's Sciandra's Saturday Night Special. Tonight's guest, Liz Czapski.
Hello there, and welcome to my Saturday Night Special. Tonight I'll be talking with yoga instructor and movement artist Liz Czapski. We'll discuss the mind-body connection, the importance of community, and a variety of other topics. I hope you enjoy it. If you do, consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Thanks.
So welcome, Liz. I have to say to people who don't know you, you're Liz Czapski, and you are a yoga instructor and movement artist. And for people at home who don't know what that is, well, I think we know what a yoga instructor is, but just fill us in with what it is you do, but specifically what a movement artist is.
I am a yoga instructor. I help people move comfortably in their bodies and become more acquainted with their bodies through the art of stretching and breath work. I guess that's pretty much what I do in terms of teaching yoga. And in terms of being a movement artist, that comes in many forms. I like to dance. I like to perform, and that's something maybe we'll touch base on later on in our conversation. But through yoga, I came across acro yoga, and I was able to get more comfortable with moving my body and using my body as kind of like a tool to express emotion. And so in terms of movement artist, that's what I mean, using my body as like a way to express myself through whether it's improv movement, which is something that, maybe you hear music and you kind of move to the rhythm of the music, or something that is performed with other people and done as something that is rehearsed and then performed as like a piece.
Now, do you come from a dance background?
No. So my family has always been,
convivial. You guys like to dance?
Yeah, I would say at family events a long time ago, especially when I was younger, it would be kind of embarrassing to have my parents out on the dance floor like, what are they doing? But I think because of that, it allowed me to embrace my body more and want to be a dancer. But yeah, I didn't get comfortable until later on in life doing that in front of people.
Right.
Except for things like maybe the chicken dance or the hokey pokey or something like that.
No, that's cool. I think that it's an important thing to be comfortable in your body, and when you talk about this, it's maybe something that we've disconnected from as a species, or at least certain people. Some people love to dance, others don't. But what I mean to say is, dance is outside of like maybe singing, but probably dance is the first art form. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, yeah. Like chimps dance and primates dance. So it stands to reason that we fell in love with movement or tried to convey things with movement. I mean, even bees dance to communicate. But so just circling back to your yoga instruction, I guess my question is, what made you interested in that to begin with? What was your first foray into yoga as an instruction, or just yoga as a discipline, rather?
Well, honestly, it happened just by mistake. And I guess a lot of things happen that way in life. But I was working, and a coworker thought that I would be interested in joining her for a yoga class, and she also had never been to yoga, so I think she was looking for an opportunity to go, but with companionship. So I said yes, and we took our first yoga class together.
And how long ago was this? Was this in high school? Was this in college? Or
this was probably 8 years ago. Okay. So it was after college.
Oh, okay. So you're not new to it, but you're also it hasn't been something that you like had a flirtation with in like younger years. You were already an adult before you kind of put your toe in the water.
Yeah, I would think with yoga too, it's something that, at least from my growing up, it wasn't something that I saw a lot of. I think
Same.
maybe like the last 10 years for me personally, it started to come into the mainstream and become something that was more socially accepted as a form of movement and exercise.
Mm-hmm.
So it was relatively new to me at the time I was asked to join my friend and take a class.
Do you think that maybe, well, I think about it in terms of my growing up, sort of like sushi. There is, I don't want to say a taboo, but there is sort of an exotic nature ascribed to it. And I mean, we live ostensibly in the Midwest in Buffalo, New York, so maybe we're the last to get some things. But yoga, I think, was a little crunchy for a while. And I wonder if it's because of maybe the ambassadors for it, if it was maybe children of the 60s or the liberal movement in the 60s, that it was highly associated with that. So this ancient practice that has generations of Indian practitioners, Nepalese practitioners, Bhutanese practitioners, kind of was cast into the do not try pile because it seemed like crap. But I full disclosure, I a light practitioner of yoga, and I love it.
Yeah, I was hoping to ask you a little bit about, I know you're the one asking me questions, but I was hoping to ask you a little bit about your journey as well, but whenever the time seems opportune.
Oh, absolutely. For me, I have back issues sometimes just by virtue of being an illustrator and working a desk job for my main gig. And my wife, your friend, she practices every day, and she doesn't do acro like you do, but she's pretty good about her practice. And so I just started mimicking her, doing the yoga with Adrian things, and 10-minute, 15-minute, sometimes 20-minute practices. And I mean, I was made to be a believer. I don't know what to say other than the proof is in the pudding, because the stretching combined with the breath, really the breath was sort of revelatory to me. Like you engage in a stretch and then you breathe at the right time and it takes it to a next level. So I'm very converted by it. But people, I know this is largely audio, but people should know that you have really good posture and you carry yourself with a confidence. So I think that that's also a proof in the pudding, is that when you see certain practitioners of yoga, they're confident in their bodies. Would you agree?
I agree, yes. And full disclosure here, that was not always the case for me. I struggled a lot with self-confidence, and I think a lot of people do, especially throughout their teenage years. And yoga really allowed me to build that inner confidence, not just internally, but also through the way I present myself to the world. And I worked for many years on my posture through yoga, and I don't know if people that knew me before yoga would necessarily see me as the same person, because I do carry myself a lot differently now. Yeah, I'd say it's very transformative and it's helped me a lot.
Well, do you see yourself in terms of pre-yoga and post-yoga? Like, and you can answer this in the micro or the macro. So before you started practicing yoga, did you feel like there was a clear delineation of who you were versus after you started? And then what I mean by the micro is, do you feel like you start your day with a practice of yoga and then it primes you for something later? Do you feel a demarcation, I guess, rather than delineation? Were you a different person prior to yoga and after it?
In terms of daily practice or just in general with time?
Both. Like, I mean,
both. Okay, I see what you're saying.
So assuming you started it 8 years ago, do you feel like since this subsequent 8 years, you've been maybe primed for something different? Like if you wouldn't have practiced yoga, then you would have been on a different trajectory, or you would be a different person?
Yeah, definitely. I consider myself a movement artist, and I think without yoga, I don't know if that's what I would call myself. Like movement is to me like the most important thing. It's like at the core of my being. So yoga kind of brought me to that place. It brought me to that place of self-awareness and confidence and trust, like mind body connection and breath. I know you mentioned breath, and breath has been huge. It's been like a detrimental aspect of my personal growth over the last 8+ years.
It's been
it's
been detrimental.
Yeah, it's been very important.
Oh,
Sorry.
I think I misheard you.
Yeah, it's been very important to my personal growth. Like I said, I wouldn't be able to call myself a movement artist today if it wasn't for me finding yoga in the beginning and becoming comfortable in my body. And yeah, I don't know, it's just led to other opportunities in terms of who I am and how I identify as Liz Czapski today in the present.
Yeah, it's foundational to your identity.
Yes, absolutely. And it's not yoga per se, but yoga is, I would say, like you mentioned, the foundation that I've built other forms of movement upon.
Right. Now, it's interesting to hear you say that it's made you the Liz you are today, because you and I talk, I guess, a little bit about this whenever we get together about yoga, just in a facile way. But how do you reconcile like the spiritual aspect? Are you drawn to the spiritual aspect of yoga, or in the traditional sense, or is it, as you said, more like the mind-body connection? Because when you said movement was foundational, it's also, I don't know if this is metaphysical or whatever, but I mean, everything moves. We all vibrate are on the atomic level too. Like, so movement truly is foundational to just the universe.
Well, I would say, I mean, it's hard to explain it, but I know you're an illustrator, and I think yoga to me is what illustrating is to you. It's kind of like this passionate thing that without it, something would be missing in my life. So it's not like I know that movement is foundational across the board for life, but for me, it's like really strongly rooting my existence here.
Right.
So I don't know, if I don't move, like if I don't start my day in movement, then my day kind of gets thrown off quite a bit.
Yeah.
It's kind of like my coffee in the morning. I need it to get me in this good space.
It's probably healthier too. I mean,
yeah.
But there is a mind-body connection, isn't there? I mean, because you prime yourself, and there's certain feedback loops of serotonin and endorphins, but also movement creates movement. So if you're feeling depressed or dejected, the best thing you can do is move if you want to escape that. And so you saying that you start your day with it, I don't know, it sets the table for more positivity, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like it's definitely a way to create a mindset for the rest of your day. And I'm not saying it's for everyone, because some people aren't morning people. Moving first thing in the morning sounds like torture.
Yeah. No,
So to each their own. But for me, like, I really take that space first thing in the morning, and I do what I need to do. And yes, it is on a spiritual level as well. I know you mentioned that. And it's really hard to explain, because I don't consider myself like very like in tune with like higher entities, but I believe in the shared existence of energy. And I just feel like the energy that you perpetuate into the world, or into, I don't know, just the universe, is the same energy that you're going to get back. So I don't know, yoga has really embedded this like positive spirit in me. And I'm not saying like I'm this happy-go-lucky person all the time, but it's just allowed me to change perspective and be more mindful in my day-to-day interactions with people and the things that I say. And I And I try my best to be mindful of how that energy interacts and affects other people, because I think it's important that everyone understands that energy is very dynamic, and it's not something, I mean, if you're constantly perpetuating like negative ideas or thoughts out into the world, I feel like it really does affect the people that surround you. I don't know. That's just my thought on it.
No, I think you made a lot of good points, and I think what you're talking about ultimately, and you correct me if I'm wrong, it's that when you're doing yoga, or even the mindset that you derive from yoga, is that you are part of a greater existence or a shared existence, and you get to decide, or you have some power over what parts you wish to play. Is that right? I mean, is that kind of...
Yeah. I think that's a good way to put it. Absolutely.
Right. So
think,
if you only dwell on the negative, or if you only put out the negative, let's say you're suspicious of people all the time and you never offer any trust, then nobody will trust you in return, or that sort of thing. These become self-fulfilling prophecies. But if you have this meditative, this calm time in your life, if you make the practice that you have the ability to slow down the way you're taking in, drinking in the world, and meditate on, speculate at your part to play. What are your interactions? What sort of world do you want to live in?
Yeah, I think that sounds pretty on par with what I'm saying. I think another thing too is just trying to like sit with, or trying to process what you're saying and what you're thinking and what you're feeling before you actually just let it go. Because I feel like half the time those emotions or feelings, it's just something that, I don't know, it's very egotistical, right? Like, I woke up and it's raining and I can't cut my grass because it's raining, and I don't know, just like, and the list goes on, and I get it, like, people do need to complain and they need a space to do that in, but I mean, it's nonstop.
It's being human, right?
Yeah, it just builds up, right? So It's all about like switching that mindset and trying to find that one thing that actually lights you up for the day, versus like just dwelling and sinking yourself down.
Mm-hmm. Right. Or even to take your example, you wake up and it's raining and you can't do what it is you want to do. At least maybe you have a greater understanding or appreciation of what it means for other people. So for instance, it's raining and you can't mow the lawn, but the robins are able to pluck more worms out of the grass because, those worms are displaced, and you get to hear more birds in your neighborhood, and that might light your week a little bit more than you thought it would. Maybe is that on track?
Oh, I actually like that example that you provided.
Oh, okay.
Because it was, outside of like the human experience. It's more just about like experiencing the natural world. And I think yoga and the natural world go hand in hand. And it's something, I mean, I've always felt connected to the natural world, but through yoga, I feel a stronger connection. And This is me kind of going off skew, but I run a lot in the mornings. So yoga plus running plus nature, it's like the total combination in the morning. And it brings this like, I don't even know, this state of
bliss
almost. Yeah. And I know a lot of it's endorphins, but also it's you pausing and taking in your surroundings and listening, especially this time of year. You hear the birds, you can like feel the air on your skin. It's quiet, but at the same time, there's so many like little noises here and there that just bring you to life and make you realize that the world is way bigger than you are. It's huge. It's beyond your existence, right? Well, you're just a piece in this bigger puzzle.
Right. You're part of the puzzle. You don't stand apart. And I just want to backtrack a little bit. You couched your language a little bit, and you said, and when you mentioned endorphins, and just because they're endorphins, that I don't think that makes it any less real, because your endorphins are feedback from your environment. And so to say that and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but people who say, well, happiness is just a flood of chemicals. And to that I say, so what? It's chemicals that are being stimulated by something. And it doesn't, not to be reductionist, but not all happiness is the same. And so when you're out running in the morning and you feel the air on your skin and you hear the birds singing and you see maybe the refraction of the light through the last vestiges of clouds in the morning, and it primes you and it lets you know that you're part of a larger world that maybe you've deafened yourself or blinded yourself to because you're stuck behind a computer screen or you're under fluorescent lights. To me, that's kind of it's a singular and beautiful experience, because you do circle back to the natural world. And I think that we inoculate and dull ourselves to these sorts of things. I mean, presumably you run with shoes. Now, our species is maybe 3 million years old and we didn't always wear shoes. So even that's a part of the natural world that we don't experience anymore, like touching the earth with our feet. So, I mean, I think that you starting your day with a run is, I don't know, maybe it reconnects you with some primacy. So what do you say to that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, I'm not just out there running when the weather's nice. I run when it's really cold. I run when it's snowing.
It's important.
It's just, yeah, it's to me, experiencing all of the elements is vital to, I don't know, living in the Northeast especially. Mm-hmm. I just feel like for the longest time I hated winter. And then, well, I came across November Project, which can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, for people who don't know, do you want to explain what the November Project is?
Sure. So November Project, it's a free fitness movement that started in Boston 8 years ago. These two guys got together and they just started like moving in the morning at very early hours, and
like 6 a.m. is typically when I see you update your Instagram story, right?
Yeah. So in Buffalo, typically before the whole pandemic, we would meet up at 6:10 a.m. and work out as a community. Anyone's welcome to come. You don't have to at all. All bodies are welcomed. So long story short, this small group that started in Boston is now in 52 cities worldwide, and Buffalo is one of those cities. And even during this pandemic, everyone is still working out together via Zoom. But their whole thing is, you know, you get out there and you work out as a community. We're weatherproof, so you're out there when it's raining, when it's snowing, when it's cold, and you're just sticking it out and just doing it as a community and getting healthy together.
No, that's cool. And I know it's easy for me to say now because we're in a pandemic, but I was looking forward to doing a couple of these with you this summer, especially now that I live closer to where I work, and if I'm able to, I'd like to join up. But just, I noticed that you talk a lot about movement and mind-body connection, and I'm wondering if you're familiar with that phrase. People think that we're a body with a spirit, but we're a spirit with a body. And now, I mean, do you believe in that? Because I'm coming around to that. In full disclosure, I'm an atheist, skeptic, non-believer, but I have my own evolving sorts of beliefs regarding just consciousness and everything else. So
yeah, no, I agree. I feel like our body, the purpose of our bodies is for our soul, right? I don't know. That's my opinion. I mean, just like, I don't know, people are like, my body doesn't define who I am. My thoughts don't define who I am. I feel like in the pit, it's your soul that defines who you are, because that's at the heart of you. It's your passions. It's the things that keep your heart beating and like.
It's the core of your being.
Yeah. Like, I mean, my body allows me to do a lot of great things. It allows me to move and connect with people, but without that soul and that passion for that connection and, I don't know, that interaction, I mean, I would literally just be like a body, you know?
Right, yeah.
So interesting.
There's this feedback, and it's cyclical too, because there's people you think of Stephen Hawking, and, somebody who was ostensibly trapped in their body, but who had amazing thoughts and hypotheses that really changed our understanding of the cosmology of the universe and how we interact with that cosmology and epistemology. But to say that, I'm guessing that he still would have preferred to have his body too working, because there's a totality that exists. And so what I'm saying in a roundabout way is, do you feel like that your love of movement is also maybe a sign of gratitude to having a functioning working body, like that you're kind of complementing, maybe it's a humanist endeavor, to try and, while you have your body, to utilize it. People who are elderly and maybe can't run miss running, and the people who were once strong and are no longer strong miss strength. So do you feel that there is some spiritual hygiene that goes with using your body to the best of its ability?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, not a day goes by that I'm not grateful to have a body that is able to move to function in the way it's able to function. I don't know. And I think I'm not supposed to cry. No, just kidding. I don't know.
I'm not supposed to cry. This is not Oprah.
I'm just thinking about coming back to yoga and how yoga has really has given me that mindset of gratitude day to day. And it's not just for my body, but it's for everything, right? But when I think about moving and I think about my ability to do it, and I don't know, it's something that not everyone can experience or can no longer experience, as you gave a few examples. And I think it's important that people don't take this time for granted. If you do have a body and you're able to do beautiful things with it, and whether that's, creating art or cooking or going for walks and just seeing things that you wouldn't be able to see otherwise or to experience otherwise. So it's not just about movement, but it's just about experiencing those things, coming back to the soul and the passions that drive you and make you who you are. Yeah, I don't know. That was a mouthful.
I feel like I've been a little long in the tooth in this conversation, but I'll just say, your brain sits in the dark inside the cavity of your skull, right? And your brain has its eyes, and it has the nose, and it has everything, and it can perceive light, and it can smell roses, and it can smell wet grass, and then your hands can pet your cat and feel, the warmth and the fur of it. And your body allows your brain to feel these joys and to respond to it. So if you don't embrace your body, or at the very least, if you don't treat it with a sort of reverence, then your term putting a governor on maybe your ability to be human or to be a spiritual creature too. Because I think that there's this false dichotomy that we're either spiritual or physical beings, and, one informs the other, or at least one can help amplify the other.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think people don't realize that having a functioning body is a privilege. And I think that's part of the reason why so many people take their bodies for granted, is because they don't realize how amazing it is, like truly amazing it is. The fact that, we can walk or ride a bike or even just go outside and observe what's around us. But they're little things that people miss out on because they're too busy looking at a bigger picture, or thinking about the things that they're missing out on instead of being present right now and focusing.
No, I think you're 100% right, because if you try to look at a picture that's too big, you're going to miss what's right in front of your face. So all that being said, with the quarantine and the shelter in place sort of orders and suggestions, what would you advise? Well, first of all, what is it that you're doing so that you can still scratch that itch or be the most physically fulfilled sort of person you can be? Are you still going on your runs, observing the social distancing, engaging in exercise, yoga, all these sorts of things?
Yes, all of the above. Typically, I am part of various communities where I would see people in person, but over the course of the last month and couple weeks, I haven't been able to do that, but I'm still sticking to what I love to do. And I think the key is to have a routine and build that routine so that it becomes kind of the norm, which at this point for me, it has become the norm. So even on days that I don't necessarily, like, there were a few days in the beginning that I wasn't working, because I'm working currently. I wasn't working full 5 days a week, but I still got up early on those days that I was not working, the same time I normally would get up. And I went through my routine and tried to keep things, I guess, as normal as I could. Because to me, having that routine allows the stress to subside and brings a sense of calm in my body. And it sends signals to my brain that, we're going to be okay. And this is what we do. We wake up early, we get our stretch in, go for a run, come back, stretch out again, do a little bit of yoga, eat, and start your day.
Now, can I ask, when you say that to your body, do you literally? Because I'm picturing like what's Eddie Brock and Venom from the Spider-Man comics, But really, I know that I sometimes have got to dissociate myself and say, hey, this is what we're doing. We're going to do this. Do you have that sort of talk with your body? Like, really?
I think not to say that just because I have a routine, things have been easy. So there's been some procrastination in the morning, like it's raining, and I know I used that as an example before, people complain about rain, but then take a couple of deep breaths and I remind myself the reason I'm going out for my run, because it's going to make me feel better afterwards. Sometimes the buildup is the hardest part, because mentally, that mind chatter just pretty much switches gears almost instantly, and you don't want to do the thing that you originally sought out to do. So speaking of which, I use I flip the switch, and then during my run, that there's a lot of ebb and flows during my run, and I have talks literally to myself where I have to say, you got this, just keep going.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm glad to hear you say that. I think that's normal. But then to also hear you talk about flipping the switch is something else that I've heard too. Are you familiar with Mark Twain? I think it was Mark Twain who said, if you have to eat a frog a day, the best thing to do is to start your day and just eat the frog. You know what I mean? Get it out of the way. If you have to do something like that, just eat that frog. And I do this with cold showers. I like to feel a little bit of discomfort and pain, because I know that I'm going to feel pain in my life no matter what. So if I can anesthetize myself to it, if I can imbibe some of that poison in order to maybe take the hurt out of other things, because life is real. There's nothing more natural than the people you care about dying or being in trouble or violence occurring. All these things happen. Life happens. So do you find it that way too, that in order that once you're engaging in this run, or once you're in the middle of the weather that you don't like, that, hey, I'm doing it, and now that I'm doing it, it's not so bad. I've kind of gotten the worst over that activation energy.
Yeah, definitely. It comes back to the idea that you can't grow unless you get uncomfortable. You can't grow unless you challenge yourself in a way that you haven't challenged yourself before. Mm-hmm. And I just feel like each day is different, right? So maybe one day, you feel good in your body and you go out for that run and it feels great and you're just on top of the world. And then the next day, not so much. So then you have to mentally challenge yourself in that way so that you can grow and become a better version of yourself, essentially. So I don't know. I think if anything, I think it's important that we continue to challenge ourselves mentally and physically, because that's the only way we're going to dive deeper into who we are and become more resilient and realize our strength. And I'm not just talking physically. I think a lot of people don't credit themselves enough with their ability to be resilient, especially during a time such as this. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying it has to be like physical endeavors either. It could be just having a rest day and realizing that I listen to my body and this is what I need. Resiliency comes in many different shapes and forms. And
I would agree with that, because what you're talking about is this sort of person who doesn't want to rest, and even just the discomfort of saying, I'm going to rest today because I know that that's going to make the better version of myself in the future. You know, when Friedrich Nietzsche was talking about whatever doesn't kill me makes me stronger, it's because you've withstood it and then you've kind of brought it into your being. You've integrated it into yourself. So when you're talking about resiliency, that resonates with me, because there are a lot of things that you do not want to do, but that you're going to have to do them. So if you can introduce them on your own terms, then maybe, just maybe, you'll be better prepared to traverse them in the future.
Absolutely. I think lived experiences are really what help to mold us and allow us to have like these certain perceptions of the world. So with that being said too, the more we can challenge ourselves and we can live through those experiences, I think the more we can give back to other people in terms of just listening to them or offering words based on our experiences, or just giving them insight about how other people have lived, you know? Yeah. I think that's the most beautiful part about being human, is sharing those experiences and just being human together. Like, all of our experiences are going to be different. Even if it was a similar experience, you know, we're going to have these different ways of approaching it. And it's all based on everything that you've done in your life. It's an accumulation almost.
Well, what you're talking about is pretty profound, because, and it could be that it is unique to human beings, because you and I can read about other people's struggles. We can see where they failed and where they made corrections, and that we don't have to fail in the same way. They say that time is the only teacher, but it winds up killing all its students. But your parents, they give you all the knowledge that they've acquired, right? You know, and they try to impart certain lessons on you, and not because they wish to lord over you, or, well, one would hope, but because they want you to hopefully not have to go through the same difficulties. So, I mean, people talk about YouTube not being very valuable, but in some ways it is. When you really need help on something, like if I wanted to learn how to repair the catalytic converter in a 2006 Subaru Outback, somebody has put that video on YouTube, and they're not going to be really monetized for it or whatever, but we want to help each other, and that might speak of a dignity that's endemic to the human species. What do you think? Maybe I give people too much credit because I can't just...
No, I think it's a great thing. I think that as humans, we just want to share ourselves with each other. That sounds really interesting, but it's true. I feel like we want to be heard, and we want to just be seen, and we just want to feel like that connection. And if there's some bit of information that I can share with you that makes us feel a little more connected, whether that's talking about car stuff or yoga or whatever it is, I think it just brings us closer as a species, as a community, as a
civilization.
A civilization, yeah. Yeah.
Well, if you go through something that's particularly trying or challenging, and you've gone through it and the pain was real, and you come back from it, you know, you've survived it, you've gone to war, right? And then you're the sort of person who can come back and say, yeah, war is hell. and it is not to be gone into lightly. Like, you go into war for the right reasons. You don't go into it for superficial or frivolous reasons, because people die, and innocent people die. And, you do that because you want to spare somebody unneeded pain, and you want to maybe preserve the things you care about, like the sanctity of life, or the emphasis on a peaceful, stable society. And when you said people they want to be heard, I think they especially want to be heard when they've endured that pain, because they don't want to suffer in vain. They don't want to suffer needlessly, especially because we're empathic beings.
Mm-hmm.
You want to communicate it to somebody else so that they won't have to go through the same hell you did.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think as humans, one thing that we can just do for each other is give each other that space for listening. Because I think, yes, we all have our stories, and we all want to share, and we all want to be seen, we all want to be heard. But at the same time, there's a time and place for each person to have that opportunity. And it can't always be about you and your story. Sometimes it's about just sitting back and being that person that creates a safe space or portal for someone else to share their story and their insights and their experiences in the world. I think oftentimes easy as humans just to always give our input or our emotion or our feelings in someone else's scenario. But at the end of the day, it's more important for us to hear and understand like exactly what they went through without giving our input, especially if it wasn't something that we experienced. So anyways, long story short, I think as humans, we need to step back a little and also listen a lot more with intention and patience. I don't know.
Speaking about accountability, do you think that we're doing enough to be accountable to ourselves during the quarantine? And what I mean by that is, are we truly appreciating the magnitude of what's going on, like the significance of the stoppage of international travel and trade and everything? Like, what do you think the major fallout from the pandemic and the quarantine will be?
I mean, it's really hard to say. I feel like, if anything, from my experiences so far, is that community is very prevalent right now. It's kind of weird because I'm used to doing the community thing in person. So it's going to be really interesting to see how it pans out following the quarantine. I think that community is... I totally blanked out.
No, I mean,
Sorry.
I can see that you're... Let me rephrase it. What are the effects of this? What do you honestly think is going to happen? Do you think that community is going to be at the forefront of people's minds? That now, if before people were really focused on, let's say, experiences, are they more so now? Are they more locally driven as opposed to, okay, suppose you can't travel internationally for the next 18 months to 2 years. Are people going to start reinvesting in their community, or are we going to have to really figure out what a supply line or a supply chain looks like that's centered here and making our community shine? Because we can't count on maybe what was promised from globalism or something. Sorry, I'm just doing stream of consciousness, but
no, it's okay. No, I definitely think that I think we'll be okay. I think that we have based on the communities I'm a part of, I think community will come together at the end of the day. It's going to come back and be stronger than ever. I think people will realize how we took things for granted pre-quarantine. And I also feel like people will hopefully appreciate the sense of slowing down, because experiences are cool, but like the fact that we can't do these things that we normally, consumerism, right? You can't go to the movie, you can't go shopping, you can't do these things that you would typically pay for. You're seeing more people taking advantage of the natural landscapes. Delaware Park, for instance, is always filled with people biking and walking and running. So my hope is that people realize that you can have these experiences right in your neighborhood. You can very much so like have this gratitude and appreciation for what is right here, right now. So being just more present in the moment and connecting to those resources that have always been there, but maybe you're just thinking so far ahead or looking for like the next thrill that you maybe just bypassed those things that have brought you joy during this quarantine time. Because it's been kind of actually amazing to see so many people out and about park and just in nature and going for walks. Like, what is that?
Yeah, so you imagine that there's going to be a refocus on what's in front of us. I think it was during the First World War when Americans were beginning to have a little bit of discretionary spending that the national parks had kicked off, and they couldn't travel to Europe. So people were sold, they were marketed to and saying, explore America first. And so maybe that'll be hyper local. Like, I'm born and bred in Buffalo, New York. I like it. I think you're probably the same. I'm maybe not a Buffalo booster in the same way some other people are in the community, but I know that this region and this state has got a lot to offer, and maybe that's part of the gift, is that we refocus on what it is we have, as opposed to, all right, I've saved up $2,000, I'm going to blow it in Las Vegas, as opposed to saved up $2,000, I'm going to go to like the Adirondacks, or I'm going to go someplace close and reinvigorate.
Staycation.
Yeah, I'm going to reinvigorate my local economy first. Or if I'm going to go grab dinner after all of this, I'm not going to a chain restaurant. I'm going to go to the neighborhood restaurant instead, because these are the people who do the living and dying in the community. So I want to make sure that they can afford to feed their kids.
Yeah, I think it's been pretty amazing to see kind of like a foreshadowing of this already during this time period. I feel like a lot of people are reaching out to like local businesses and trying to give them as much business as possible. And I know a lot of businesses are working with getting food to the workers on the front lines, which I think is amazing because it's coming full circle and really serving those people that are taking care of the needs of our communities. So I don't know. I think it's kind of happening already. So I'm hoping that it keeps happening following this whole quarantine. And I mean, who knows? No one really knows how much longer this is going to be. It's unpredictable.
Or if it's going to be the first of the many, like that we're going to have to...
Yeah. Because
this is what SARS-CoV-2, like it's a novel coronavirus in the same way that the SARS one in 2003 and then MRSA. So like this might be what we have to do every couple of years when there's a particularly virulent strain. And I don't know, maybe experience will give us more practiced hands. Like you were talking about, you become more resilient. I think Nassim Nicholas Taleb calls it anti-fragile. When you test something and you batter it and it becomes stronger, it's considered anti-fragile, like your immune system. You get the chicken pox and you get the flu, and then it becomes more resilient. And maybe that's what communities need to be tested with, because if we get to cut through it and decide, like you and I having a 90-minute conversation during a global pandemic, I appreciate you making the time for me. But we're not checking our phones ordinarily. Like if this were pre-pandemic and we were at supper, right? It's like we might be tempted to pick up our phones and see what whoever else is saying. And what does that ultimately, in an underlying way, it's kind of like, oh, I'm more interested in what somebody on the other end of this telephone is doing than the person in front of me. And it's been my distinct pleasure to talk with you today, because I feel like we don't get an awful lot of that now, right? And I miss you and your husband. And when this whole thing happened, it was kind of like, oh, we're going to miss out on a lot of great things. But through the miracle of technology, we've been able to keep somewhat connected. And
yeah, I mean, it's quite impressive how technology has changed during this quarantine, especially in terms of businesses. Right now I'm teaching yoga online, and I think it's just so interesting to see how businesses are still making it happen.
Yeah.
And this technology has been available, but it just wasn't needed in this regard prior. So it's just cool to see these businesses being resilient during this time and still trying to, reach their audiences. And a lot of businesses are offering free classes too, which I think is great, especially for people who are stuck at home and really can't get out to do things. So yeah, technology is amazing. It's kind of funny how it tears us apart and brings us together all at the same time.
That's right. It's like that old adage of heaven and hell being the same place. Me and hell, everybody's at a dinner table and the forks are too long, so nobody can eat. But in heaven, it's the same place, but they feed each other with the forks. Have you ever heard that?
No, but I love it.
Yeah, it's a mindset. It's
That's
about
awesome.
facilitating. So I guess I'll just ask, but before we wrap up, what is it that you're doing? I know you mentioned teaching some classes online for Studio Sophia, and if there's anything that you want to promote, just let us know.
Yeah, so I teach through Studio Sophia. It's a small woman-run business on the corner of Hurdle and Delaware. But right now we're doing Zoom classes because we can't have classes in the physical building. I teach a yoga class Wednesday nights at 6 p.m. and yoga for runners Friday at 6:30 a.m. You can run before if you want and then hop on and take class. I usually do that as a teacher. I run and then I'll teach the class. So the option is yours. And then November Project is still happening. Every day at 7:16, one of our co-leaders, his name is Steve Procknell, he does a little yoga bounce, not a yoga bounce. He does the November Project bounce, which is what we typically do on Wednesday mornings when we have our regular scheduled November Project workouts. So he's really made it into a thing. So it starts a little bit earlier every day, and he has guests from either our community, November Project Buffalo, or other November projects around the world. He's had people from, I think Boston is coming on tomorrow morning. So he's going to have two of the co-leaders from Boston on. He's had the founders from November Project. And I highly encourage anyone that just needs a little pick-me-up in the morning to tune in on Instagram through November Project Buffalo. It's live, it's fun, and you get to hear the shout song and work out a little bit. You do some jumping jacks. And then on Wednesday mornings at 6:29, you can join the Zoom workout for free. And we've been connecting November Project Buffalo, Syracuse, and Rochester all meet in the same Zoom room, and the different co-leaders lead us through some exercises, and it's hard and fun.
Yeah.
So there's lots of opportunities.
Well, that's wonderful, and it sounds like November Project is one of these resilient institutions along with Studio Sophia. This was great. I appreciate you taking the time, and I'm going to check out a lot of this. I'm sure that some of the listeners will as well, and it was really my pleasure to talk with you, and I hope that you'll come on again sometime.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for having me, and I feel like there's so many other topics we didn't touch on.
Oh, yeah, we didn't even really touch on running, and you're a huge runner.
I know. Well, that's another story for another day, I guess.
Yeah, all the more reason to have you on again. Thanks, Liz.
And that was my conversation with Liz Czapski. You can find her on the web at November Project Buffalo or at Studio Sophia Fitness Club on Instagram. You can find me online at salshandra.com or at salcomics on Instagram. Join me again next week at 9 p.m. for another Saturday night special. Until then, take care of yourself.